Hi guys, welcome to our kweliLIVE series. Thank you guys for joining us. I'm Matthew. I'm a multimedia fellow here, and today we have the amazing Oliver Hardt. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh yeah, thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, it really means
Forward.
a lot. He made a great documentary, The Black Museum, which is centered around the National African American Museum here in the Washington, D.C. So without further ado, let's just get right into it. So, what was your inspiration about making the documentary?
Um, it was quite a long journey to make this documentary. It started in 2013 with the first film about the museum. It was called "This Building Will Sing for All of Us," and this first film was centered around the architectural concept and the architectural vision. Um, of the museum. So at that time, there was the building wasn't there. The challenge was to make a film about a building that hasn't been built yet. I asked the lead architect, David Adjei, to talk about his vision for the museum. When we completed this film, it didn't feel complete, of course, because we learn a lot about the idea behind it, about the program, about the plans of the directors and so on. But we couldn't actually see it, so it was quite clear for us that we had to return when the museum was actually built and open to the public. Yeah, that's actually happened in like 2017, 1 year after the opening. We went back to DC and started filming exterior, interior in the museum during the opening hours, and again talked to a lot of people who were responsible for the program. We talked to the director, Lonnie Bunch, who now is the director of the Smithsonian Institution as a whole. Also, we talked again to David Adjei, the lead architect. We talked to Chino, one of the board members, who was then the CEO of American Express, and who has supported the project for a very long time. And so in this second film, the second phase, we were trying to put all the pieces together to find a representation of this project as a whole. Yeah, so that was the idea, and still, for me, it was really important also to talk about the building, but also to talk about the history of it and the history of the institution, and also about, of course, the program. So what you actually see in there, and also how people respond to it. So all this was important for the actual film, The Black Museum.
So this was a project that you expanded on beyond your initial plans.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe it was my plan from the beginning, but I didn't know about it. But after completing the first film, it was totally clear that we have to make a second film about it. The first film became something like a teaser for the actual film, The Black Museum. Yeah, I'd say so.
So the documentary immediately starts with a shot of Colin Kaepernick, and I thought that was really interesting. Can you kind of share with us why you decided to go with that shot first?
Yeah, the was actually the opening of the film was not so much about Colin Kaepernick, but it was more about the way the museum deals with artifacts. What we see is the actual shirt of Colin Kaepernick. The shirt has become kind of iconic because that he wore it when he first knelt down during the national anthem to protest racism and police brutality and so on. The museum has a certain way of working with artifacts, with real artifacts, in order to tell and preserve stories and histories. And so it was a very good example for how they curate what they present, and also how they curate history in the making, because it was like 3 months or a year after it actually happened, but it was already there as an artifact. And if you imagine, like in 50 years, when people, or when a curator wants to make an exhibition, curate an exhibition about a certain period of time, you have this shirt, for example, and this shirt tells a story. I thought it was very fascinating. And and you have kind of this, how you say, condensed history in one artifact. So that was the reason why I chose the Colin Kaepernick shirt for the opening of the.
And I thought it was a very powerful moment. It honestly set the tone for the whole documentary, just to stress the importance of this museum to not only Black people, but people everywhere. So I really loved that. I was like immediately drawn in by it. But
Yeah.
the thing they really discussed in the documentary that I thought was interesting was the difficult it was just to get the museum even open. I mean, why do you think it was so difficult to have a museum that details Black history, Black culture? Like, why was it fought for so long?
Well, that's not an easy question, but one reason, of course, is probably the denial of the majority of the American society to accept that African Americans have a different history from the rest of the population, and that this history is, of course, interwoven with the general history, but still it's very special. And so I think that is one of the important reasons why this museum has faced so much resistance over the years. I mean, I think it took them around 100 years really to build it, not to build it, but to establish it. And even when it when it was decided to build it, it's still that they had no money, no building, no collection. So they really had to build it literally from scratch. Yeah? In every sense, in every aspect of the establishment of museum. So, but well, it's hard to say. I mean, there are obvious reasons. One, I think, is, well, what I just said is probably one of the most important, most important reasons for the resistance against such. Of course, we all know about a lot of other reasons
For sure.
why they didn't want it to happen.
So you guys filmed on the opening day, like you said, or one of the first days the museum was actually open. Um,
No, we actually we filmed 1 year after the opening.
1 year.
I was at the opening personally, but I didn't film there. Just I was there as a guest.
Mhm.
But we filmed 1 year. We filmed 1 year after the opening.
So even like that's still early, in the museum's existence and its open doors. When you were filming, though, can you kind of describe what you saw in people's reactions as they were walking through the exhibits, or just being somewhere in the museum? Like, what reactions did you see?
Mm. Uh, when before we actually started shooting, I spent two or three afternoons with my team inside the museum, just exactly to see what is going on there. And it was really kind of overwhelming how how intense it was, also for us, but also for the normal visitors.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we witnessed like really moving scenes. Like, for example, there was one woman who recognized herself on one of the photos of 9/11. So
Mm-hmm.
in the midst of the rubble, she recognized, and she knew that this photo existed, but she didn't know that this photo was part of the museum's collection. So when she saw it, she was really like, she was shocked in a good way. I mean, she was really emotional, and she was proud and happy that she had became part of the history, and part of this important collection. And you have the feeling, or we had the feeling, that the people there, well, that it's their museum and it's their history. This is actually how they responded to things. That one had the feeling that that also the artifacts were theirs. Yeah, there's I sensed a very, very strong connection in the spectators and the audience to what is actually happening inside the museum, or what is presented inside the museum, beyond the actual histories, of course. Yeah. So, and that was very intense. And for me, as a filmmaker, it was very important that we had the opportunity to film during normal opening hours. It was really difficult because, as can see in the film, the museum is really packed all the time, 7 days a week. It's full. People are queuing up for I don't know, 100 meter, and it's always really packed and crowded. And so it was really a challenge to film in there, but it was really worth it because we really got very close to. So the camera sees what the people see. So this is a kind of it's a kind of filming I like very much personally. Also, it's not fly on the wall, but it's like taking the point of view the of the visitor, at the same time being amongst them. So that was really important that we had the chance to actually film in there during the opening hours. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's great that you mentioned that because it's still to this day, like years after the opening, it's still packed. Like you really have to plan and get tickets, sometimes weeks in advance just to get into the museum. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to see that so many people are interested in this museum. So let's use this as a segue to one of my favorite parts of the documentary was when you got to follow David Auger around and kind of hear his plans about building a museum. Like what was that like just interviewing him and getting his insight on how he wanted the museum to look?
Yeah. Um, yeah, that was also for me a very, very exciting thing because we already knew each other because he was also part of the first film. So it's now like 4 years later, and the museum is actually there. And then I went back to him to London to talk to him about what's actually happened since then. And I mean, as you can see in the film, he's very articulate about his vision for the museum and about what it actually means, also for him personally, but also he thinks what the museum means for African American people and American people in general. Um, and yeah, we talked, and I talked to him about the architectural aspects of the museum, as well as every other aspect of the museum. And there's this quote I really like where he says, "This is a museum where the container and the content are one,"
Mm,
which is actually what he was trying to achieve, that the building is informed by the program, by the requirements of program, about its meaning, and of course about all aspects of the African diaspora. And there's a lot of aspects of the African diaspora, of the culture of the African diaspora in the building itself, like in the design of the building. The so-called corona, the porch, the pool, and things like that. So, and I thought that, well, who could explain this better than the artist himself? So it was really crucial also to have him in the film for the second time. There in the film there are like portions from the first film. You probably have noticed, because there are some sequences where the museum is under construction. And also the first interview with David is from that time. And then there's the second interview, which we actually made in 2017, filming for the Black Museum. And so we could also talk about the whole timeline of events that actually that finally or eventually led to the opening, which was really exciting, and it, from in my point of view, it gives the film a certain depth and richness, because you can't get closer to the inspiration and the information about what is there, why it is there. I mean, you have to talk to the actual film. Also, I mean, this one of the central elements is the interviews with Lonnie Bunch, the founding director. But they are both like very important aspects. So, and for me, the fascinating thing is how these different interests, how they came together in this project, which is at the end very fortunate in a way.
And yeah, it really, when you see the museum, it stands out amongst all the museums around it. I mean, you see it and you automatically ask yourself like, oh, what is that? Like, what's going on there? And it was nice to have that part of the documentary. Like, I think you accomplished exactly what you wanted to do, was just seeing the process, like from start and then to finish, and then now you're in the museum. Like, that was just a really good feeling to just see it grow right before your eyes, you know? So it was a great part of the documentary. But let's discuss, the impact of the museum. It's like, what kind of impact have you seen since it's been opened?
I just want to add something, because the contextualization of the building itself is also very important. I mean, it sits in the middle of Washington D.C. on the National Mall, and it's a little bit ironic that it's just opposite to the Museum of American History, which is very interesting and also kind of a triumph, I think. And there was this one visitor we interviewed, a young white guy, and he told me that he also visited the American History Museum, and he said something like, you have same artifacts, but in the American History Museum, they tell you a totally different story. And then you come here to the African American Museum, and the story is complete different. And you didn't know about all this gruesome implications certain artifacts or certain parts of history have. So this is, I think, this is interesting, to this juxtaposition of different histories that are expressed through actual buildings, through museums. So I thought this was very, very intriguing. But sorry, I lost your.
No, you're fine. Because it honestly, like, it's crazy because like you said, they're in proximity of each other. Like they're really all those museums are walking distance from each other. So it's crazy to just like you get like a more real perspective of African American History Museum versus like the museum that's like a couple steps away. So yeah,
Mm,
that's crazy. But what do you like? What impact do you see the museum has had in general,
mm,
globally? It could be like
yeah.
the United States. Like, but what impact do you see?
I think, I mean, it's not, um, in Europe, they think that, or they used to think that this was the only African American museum in the United States, which is obviously not true. There are like, I think, 100 or so of them. But the thing, of course, is that this is a national museum, it's part of the Smithsonian Institution, which makes it a little bit different. And my feeling was that that it gives something back to the people. It's kind of an acceptance, a moment of acceptance that even on a national scale, these histories are different history. And so I think impact is enormous, yeah, because when you see like all these millions and millions of people that are visiting the capital every year, and they make this trail through all the museums, and this changes this completely changes the discourse, just the fact that it's there. Yeah? So I think the impact of the museum is really it's huge in terms of rewriting certain rewriting a certain part of history of the US. I cannot say. I mean, I only know the reactions to my film, and everybody says, "Okay, next time when I'm in DC, I'm going to go and see the museum," yeah, which is positive, a positive effect of reaching out with a documentary on TV, which is seen by a lot of people. Um, but I cannot, of course, I cannot say how it really what the impact globally. But from what I said when I was there and from my conversations with people, it's really kind of it's a game changer, I'd say.
And I agree with everyone's reactions because after I watched it, I wanted to go see it too because personally, I haven't been yet.
Mhm.
But definitely when the world opens up and it's safe to go to places, like this documentary was definitely a push to me. Like, all right, I need to get into this museum and really experience it for myself.
Oh, that's good to hear. Thank you.
But going back inside the museum, one of the cool sections of it that you had was you included like an artwork section, and I really didn't know that it had like paintings and different kinds of artwork in the museum as well. Um, and I thought it was cool that they talked about how like they highlight big time Black artists and maybe like ones that were overlooked in history. How important do you think it was to include that section in the documentary itself?
Yeah, um, I think it's actually the the only history museum that has an art gallery or an extra, a separated art gallery. And um, I have a little bit of construction work going on next
Mhm.
door on a Sunday. I don't know if you hear it.
I don't hear it at all. Personally, I don't
Okay,
hear
that's
it
good. Okay, it's a little bit irritating, but okay, sorry,
either. You're
very
fine.
annoying. Um, so can you ask the question again?
Yeah, of course. So I thought it was cool that you included a section in the documentary about the art gallery. And I was saying how I didn't even know that they had an art gallery inside the museum until I watched this. And I liked how they included like big time Black artists and some that were overlooked. And I was just wondering, like, what was your perspective on including that in the documentary? How important do you think it was to just share that? Um,
Mm. I think it's very important to have this because A lot of other things are kind of common knowledge. I mean, when it comes to music, so everybody knows about the achievements in the music, but hardly anyone, especially in Europe, know about the achievements in the visual arts. And what is even lesser known is that there is a tradition of abstract artists in the African American realm. So that's why I mean, the gallery is much bigger than what I show from it, and we focused a little bit on the abstract. I mean, there was Afri Cobra in it, I think, and Amma Thomas, for example. And I personally am very much interested. I'm personally very much interested in abstract art and abstract paintings. But yes, the concept for the gallery is quite interesting because, as you said, you have like big names in there and artists that are quite established, like for example Lorna Simpson. But you also have artists contemporary and also like from earlier in the last century that are not very well known, and so they by putting them together, they kind of complete the history, the art, the history of art of African American art. They well, they don't call it African American art; they call it American art, and call them artists of African American descent. But they don't talk about African American art because, from their perspective, it's something that doesn't exist because it was always part of the larger history of arts in the United States. And I think I thought it was important to include this in the documentary because that's not so well known, especially in comparison to other cultural achievements, like, for example, in music or in sports, for example. Yeah. Yeah. And also, really, I did it also for my personal reasons because I'm much interested in contemporary art. So it's crucial to have it in there in the document.
Was there a part of the document that was your favorite to make or that you just enjoyed watching yourself?
That's a hard one. um, I cannot really say, but in hindsight, it's more like the fact that we have Phil Freeland in the documentary. Phil Freeland was the architect of record for the whole project. He was a very well known African American architect, and he died 1 year, I think, after we filmed with him. I mean, he was very ill already at the time we filmed with him, and so for me, it's kind of touching to see him talk about his legacy and about his about the process of developing this museum as a kind of life's work for him. So it was so now that after he passed, I was really happy to have him in the documentary. So when I hear him talking now about it, it's kind of moving. And also when we were editing the film, I decided to give him the very last words of the documentary, and I like the ending very much. Yeah. So, but I cannot say that I have one scene that is especially it's my favorite. So, but it's one of the important parts. That he kind of closes the film. Yeah.
And last question, what do you want your audience to take away most from the documentary?
I think that there is something in it that speaks about persistence and resilience that hopefully I have told the story as the story of resilience. Yeah, that this is a project that has come to life despite all the obstacles and backlashes, and I think that's the most important thing I want the audience, I want the audience to take away from the film. And also, I mean, when the opening was like in the very last possible moment of Barack Obama's Barack Obama's time in the office. So I mean, I think it was in August 2016 or September. It was, I think it was already after the election. I don't remember exactly. But I think this is also, I mean, that it was the latest the latest possible moment this thing opened with Barack Obama, and it was really a triumph. And it was the result of like 100 years. It was 100 years in the making, and it was only there because they never gave up. So, and I think this is one of the important messages of the film. Just that they keep on something, and then no matter how improbable it is, it's finally eventually it happened. So probably that's probably the one thing, or the most important. There are other things like the importance of knowing your history and things like that, but I mean, they are self-evident.
Well, thank you so much, Oliver, for taking time to get interviewed by us. This was a great interview, and the documentary is streaming now. It's called The Black Museum on kweliLIVE TV. You guys should definitely check it out. And yeah, have a good one.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thank
Thank you.